Unspoken Issues.
Welcome, Unspoken Legion. This is Chris Armstrong coming at you with another episode of Unspoken Issues. Our buddy Jesse Starcher is MIA right now as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is kind of affecting everybody. He and his family are safe and healthy, but he's taken some time off from podcasting because, everybody's kind of affected by this in different ways. And I'm not alone. However, Evan Bevins is here with me today to discuss a little Image Comics. How you doing tonight, Evan?
Doing good. Glad to have human contact, even if it is of the virtual kind. Social distancing, man.
Yeah. So we got a poll up on the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. We're doing a little Image Comics from the 90s. I picked an issue from Image, and Evan also picked an Image issue. My selection was not victorious. I picked Telos number 5, which got 45% of the vote. Badrock Company number 5 got 55% of the vote, so it was 20-24 as far as the official count. But yeah, I picked Telos because I was a big fan of that comic. It's came in right at the end of the 90s. I think 99 was when issue 1 came out, and by issue 6 or 7, it was already into the 2000s. So getting in right under the gun for the 90s, Todd DeZago and Mike Ringo, kind of like a fantasy, really lighthearted adventure story, which you were not familiar with, right, Evan?
No, but, like I mentioned to you online, when I saw that it was Michael Ringo art, I was kind of tempted to vote for it myself. But the only place I was able to find a copy was on Comixology in French.
If you ever want to learn French, that'll help you out, I think. So.
Yeah, well, it's been a while since I had my classes in French, so it might help jog my memory. But I am curious about it. Whenever I can get back out and start digging through back issue bins again, I have to check that out. Yeah,
I'm sure they're all available in dollar bins. I don't think there's a lot of financial value attached to them, but it's a really fun book. So anybody listening that has never checked out Telos, I definitely recommend it. But your selection, Badrock Company number 5, is the winner. So just briefly, why did you pick Badrock Company number 5?
Well, when you said the theme was Image Comics and not number 5, as people might think based on our choices, Badrock Company is one of only 2 Image Comics I was actually collecting at that point. The other one was The Max by Sam Keith. And yeah, for some reason, Badrock Company was a 6-issue limited series. It was where he teamed up with different Image characters. First issue was with Pitt, and they fought. Second issue was with Fuji from Stormwatch, and they fought on pay-per-view, no less. Third issue was with Mighty Man from Freak Force. Fourth issue was Velocity from Cyberforce. And then I got issue 5 with Grifter, and 20 years went by before I found issue 6, where he teamed up with Shadowhawk in a bargain bin at a con to complete the set.
So did he not fight Mighty Man?
I don't know. I can only assume. Because he's mighty, and that's usually what happens. I don't think he struck Velocity. That would have been pretty DC. Yeah, but and he and Grifter don't fight except verbally in this issue. But I've been meaning to go back and reread them. I haven't read the Shadowhawk one because I wanted to go back and read the whole series, and it's in my one of several boxes of comics I mean to get around to reading at some point.
The old to read piles. I'm familiar with them. But yes, Mighty Man is comparable as far as power levels. He's I don't know, you may not remember if you haven't read it in 20 years, but he's a Savage Dragon character, and he's basically Shazam. So
okay,
he's a guy who actually.
I'm flipping through it now. Let's see. No, it looks like the villain actually overt kill. Looks like the villain actually arrives before they get a chance to fight each other. So for once, there's not a case of mistaken identity where the heroes slug it out first. So that's a departure.
I think I have all these Badrock Company issues. I wasn't getting them when they were coming out. It looks like this is 95 for issue 5. So that actually, come to think of it, was in a period when I was not collecting comics. There was about a year and a half, 2 years, starting in early 94, where I wasn't collecting comics for a little while. So I got back into it right around the time Marvel vs. DC happened, which would have been, I guess, middle to late 96. Or was that 95?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I know a lot of people are hoping that they'll finally bury the hatchet and do it again when the comic shops can reopen.
Yeah, I saw that a lot of like creators angling for that on Twitter and stuff, and trying to get some excitement for it. That'd be really cool. I mean, I've kind of been under the assumption that it was never going to happen again, but with DC, with all this talk about DC not wanting to publish comic, or AT&T, I guess, not wanting to do the publishing anymore. Maybe the rules will change on some of that stuff, which I guess that's really Disney that I kind of have doubts on wanting to give DC exposure.
Yeah, it seems like Marvel doesn't really need anybody's help in exposure right now.
Right.
Which, I mean, not that any of the fans think of it that way. We just want to, see Squirrel Girl team up with Booster Gold, or is that just me?
Sure. Hey, I'd read that. I'm a Booster Gold fan. So, but anyway, yeah, I was out of it for about a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. So I did go back and get these in dollar bins and stuff later on down the line. But I haven't read them, in probably 20 years at this point. So not a whole lot of recollection for these. But Badrock is one of my favorite characters, even to this day. When Image launched, I was there day one. I was 11 or 12 whenever Image launched. And, Badrock was a 13-year-old boy in like this giant hulking body, so obviously I'm going to relate to that and kind of jump on that as one of my favorite characters. And he's always remained that way, even to this day where he is no longer in print, pretty much, at least very sporadically.
Yeah.
So Grifter, I guess you only really know Grifter from his interactions with Badrock.
Yeah, pretty much. If you take out the X-Men WildC.A.T.S crossover, and then the stuff where he appeared in DC, from Flashpoint and beyond, this may be the only Grifter comic I read. I mean, his look, I'm familiar with him. I mean, he's one of the most iconic looking 90s characters.
Right.
And I do plan on, if it gets to the point where we all have to wear masks because of the coronavirus, I plan on modeling my mask after him.
So for sure.
But yeah, I don't, other than that, he's from the WildC.A.T.S. He has guns and he doesn't play well with others. I don't know a lot about him. I did mean to look up. I know his real name is Cole Cash. I can only hope and assume his middle name is Hard.
Don't check. Just assume.
Yeah. I'll be disappointed if it's like Percival or something.
Kind of off topic, but related to the middle name, I learned within the last year or so, you're familiar with Chuck E. the
yes.
theme, the children's theme restaurant.
Oh, yes.
Pizza place.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that Chucky, which it's Chuck, E, middle initial is E, Cheese, and his middle name is Entertainment.
Wow. I did not know that.
So there's trivia for you. Keep that in your back pocket. You may need that one day.
The only middle name trivia that I can counter with, a year or so ago, Jesse and I did a podcast for a NFL picking league we were in. And I did a list of the greatest names in NFL history.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the guys on the list I found out shared a middle name. Okay. Miami Dolphins quarterback Dan Marino and Baltimore Colts.
No information, sure, yeah.
What was that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then Baltimore Colts quarterback Johnny Unitas, who has not, to my knowledge, shared the screen with Jim Carrey. Both have the middle name Constantine.
Oh, wow. You don't hear that very often.
No. So, yes,
yeah, I know
John Constantine Unitas. And, of course, his famous left tackle Swamp Thing.
Say again?
I said John Constantine Unitas and his famous left tackle Swamp Thing.
I only know Johnny Unitas from Simpsons references. So
okay.
And I mean, I know he's a football player, but my knowledge of football is fairly limited. So
I mean, man, you took it up a notch with Chuck E. Cheese's middle name, so I had to counter with something.
Well, Cole Hard Cash, and he was kind of the breakout Wildstorm character, or WildC.A.T.S character anyway, because like you said, he actually did take fairly decently sized role in DC's New 52. He had his own solo title along with Voodoo, another WildC.A.T.S character. But in the 90s, outside of WildC.A.T.S, you didn't see a lot of those other characters. But Grifter, it seemed like, showed up a lot more often as a guest star. And he had a mini-series called The Kindred, where he co-starred with Backlash. And he was always seemingly like the most popular WildC.A.T.S character and Wildstorm character. And, I mean, I guess Wildstorm is pretty much dead at this point at DC. I think since they did Rebirth, they haven't really utilized any of that stuff. Although I'm not reading a whole lot of DC.
I haven't seen it pop up lately. I know a lot of the Gen 13 characters were popping up in Titans, but that was New 52, not so much. Right. Not so much Rebirth.
Yeah, and there was Warren Ellis was doing the Wildstorm series. I think it ran 24 issues, and it took place outside of DC continuity, so it was kind of its own thing. And it had a kind of a planetary vibe in some ways.
And then he was supposed to be doing some kind of WildC.A.T.S reboot. Yeah. But that I forget what happened, but that never came to fruition.
Right. They did Wildstorm, and then there was a secondary Wildstorm title that focused on I want to say Michael Cray was his name. It was Deathblow, that character. That was like maybe an 8 or 10 issue series, whereas the Wildstorm book went 24 issues, and it was supposed to lead into a WildC.A.T.S relaunch. And the artist, whose name escapes me, I really like his art, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. Basically, I think there was some issues with him getting the work done on time, and it kept getting delayed until apparently DC just canceled it. So for a while, it was just like they just took the solicits out, and they said they're going to re-solicit it at a later time. But a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I think Warren Ellis pretty much said on Twitter that the book's never going to happen. So kind of disappointing.
Ramon Villalobos.
Where it was going. Sorry?
Ramon Villalobos.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I Googled it.
Yeah, he's got a really wonky, almost indie kind of style. It's hard for me to describe. I'm not great at describing art styles anyway, but a really unique art style, and I can't recall what I had read that he had done before. It seemed like there was another Image book he had worked on. But anyway, no Grifter coming soon to comic shop near you. So the actual plot, I'll do a quick synopsis book. This is from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. We got Badrock and Company number 5 from Image Comics, Extreme Studios. Cover date January 1995, on sale date February 16th, 1995, which tells me that since the on sale date is actually about a month after the cover date, it was probably several months late, as a lot of Image books in the 90s were. Written by Robert Loren Fleming, with pencil art by Todd Knock and inker Larry Stucker, colorist Byron Tallman. I'm not great with pronunciation, so I hope I got most of that right. So I'm not familiar with
me.
Sure. I'm not familiar with Robert Loren Fleming. I don't know that name. Any familiarity with you on?
No, him? I know the writers rotated on this. I think they had a different writer on every issue. Keith Giffen wrote the first one with Pitt, and then Jim Valentino that created Shadowhawk. I think he wrote he wrote the last issue with Shadowhawk. But they rotated the writers. But Todd Knock did the art all the way through, which I didn't realize until I went back and looked at these, because I knew Todd Knock from Young Justice, which I absolutely loved, and then these came out first, but I didn't realize until I went back and looked at him that he did all the art for these.
Yeah, I really liked Young Justice when it was that was a 90s title too, right? Like probably 97 or 98.
I think so. It at least came in at the tail end. I was in college when it came out, which was late 90s. So yeah, it at least started in the 90s. I think it went on into the 2000s, but
yeah, I remember liking Todd Knock's art in the Young Justice era. He's still around. He still does stuff. He usually, it seems like I see him pop up on Spider-Man stuff, either like backup stories or like fill-in issues and stuff. And, you know, I as I said earlier, like I've really liked his art in the Young Justice era, and I thought he was really, really good. I think he was kind of perfect for that series, and he does a really good job here with this issue as well, and I'm sure with the other issues in this series.
Yeah, I like his art. It has kind of a cartoonish feel, but not too much. It's got some realism in it too, and I kind of like that balance. I mean, they are comics, but also like it, you know, to be pretty easy to follow. Trivia on Todd Knock: he drew Amazing Spider-Man 583, which was the Obama issue.
Right.
It was like one of the mega selling comics.
Right. And it still, I'm sure, catches first print catches high dollar.
Yeah.
Well, let me get to the plot synopsis real quick, and then we'll talk about what we liked and didn't like about this. Before we get to the synopsis real quick, just a little trivia on Badrock. Initially, he was called Bedrock in the early issues of Youngblood. First 4 issues, I believe, he was consistently Bedrock, and then at some point before the fifth issue came, like there was a hiatus after issue 4, and by the time it came back, he had changed his name to Badrock. The urban legend for a long time was that Hanna-Barbera was going to sue Rob Liefeld for using the name Bedrock. Now he had to change it. I think in reality it was that Liefeld was afraid that could happen, so he just preemptively changed his name to Badrock, which is a better like 90s superhero, extreme style.
Yeah, Bedrock's a little too on the nose.
Yeah.
But, Badrock, it's like, wait, what now?
And, just to give Hanna-Barbera a little extra ammunition, Bedrock's catchphrase in mid-battle was Yabba Dabba Doom, which he would belt out in the middle of punching out some ninjas or whoever he was fighting at the time. Yeah, I don't think he says it in this issue, but... Yeah,
you could make the argument, I mean, Bedrock, it's associated with the Flintstones, but you could make the argument that could still stand on its own. But yeah, once you get in there, you're just asking for a call from the lawyers.
All right, let me get to the synopsis real quick. With Badrock and Company number 5. We open with Badrock and Grifter in mid-drop, parachuting into the desert. After being spotted by local soldiers, they fight them off, and a series of flashbacks reveal that Badrock has recruited Grifter to help recover his mother. An organization called the Covenant of the Sword has kidnapped her in an effort to force her husband to create a deadly chemical weapon. Through Grifter's own flashback, we learn that he had actually once been romantically involved with Badrock's mother, but she left him when he proposed to her. Back in the present day, Badrock and Grifter find the Covenant compound, and after fighting off soldiers and cyborgs, manage to rescue Badrock's mom. So, give me your initial thoughts, Evan, on Badrock and Company number 5.
Well, I just like the fact that it's a one and done story. It seems like we don't get those a lot anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some great 6, 7, 12-part stories that are collected in trades, but a lot of us got into comics reading single issues, and it's nice to have one that rewards you for buying the single issue instead of rewarding you for remembering all the complexities that from a month ago and 2 months ago. So it ends a little abruptly, but it's just a good, straightforward story. You got two guys with contrasting styles. I mean, I feel like you get a good idea of who these guys are. Of course, as I said, I'm not the most knowledgeable about Grifter, but I feel like you get a good idea of who these guys are, how they do what they do, and it's just a straightforward but fun story.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought reading through this as well. Like, it's all in a nice, neat little package. Most modern comics, I rail on modern comics sometimes, Old Man Yells at Cloud, etc. But I mean, I'm still reading them. So, yeah. But yeah, this is a nice throwback because nowadays the modern equivalent of like a one-off is like a 3-issue arc. That's like a really short, compact story in modern comics. You almost never see issues that are just a one complete story. And if it is, it's probably like a fill-in issue where they had to scramble to put something together before the next big arc starts or whatever. So it's really... Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like if this was coming out now, it would have been 3 or 4 issues. There would have been like a 0 issue that had Grifter and Badrock's mom on a date and fighting off terrorists. Although I think we were talking before we started recording, keep calling her Badrock's mom because that's the only name she gets in there. So not that I'm an expert, but I am pretty sure this comic would fail the Bechdel test, measuring the representation of women in fiction, because I think it requires 2 women, and usually they have to be named.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, she's purely a plot device here, like just an excuse to get these two together to go on a little adventure.
Yeah. I kept one reason that this stuck out with me, when we were looking at comics to pick was the whole, Grifter being her old flame, which they don't really get very awkward into that until the very end of the issue. Mm-hmm. But I kept hearing. Yeah, oddly enough, since we heard today that Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne passed away, right. I kept hearing Stacy's mom playing in my head when I was reading this. Only change it to Badrock's mom.
Yeah, I mean, we get a flashback of Grifter and Badrock's mother on a date. He proposes, and she basically is like, I could never marry anyone who's so secretive and emotionless and whatnot. And Cole was going to basically say, screw off, Badrock, until he realized, oh, your mom is my ex-girlfriend. And so then he had that emotional investment. But outside of that, he wasn't really interested in helping his fellow superhero, in this mission until he had his own reasons.
But yeah, so that was just a neat, and another neat contrast with the two of them is like, you get the feeling that if someone had come to Badrock like, hey, help me out here, Badrock would have been like, sure, let's go. And he's like, hey, what do you mean? You're a superhero. We got to team up. And Grifter's like, no, I got stuff.
Yeah, great. It's not in this issue, but a great example of Badrock's attitude and style is Savage Dragon #3, where he fights Savage Dragons. He was the guest star, and they had this big battle all throughout Chicago, destroying buildings, putting people in danger. And at the end, Dragon asks him what all this is about, and he says, I was just testing to make sure you were tough enough to join Youngblood. And then he's arrested promptly.
Yeah. This is why you don't put the teenager in charge of recruiting for your super team.
Yeah, exactly. So there was also a moment with, they're when they first land in the desert, they're being attacked by these soldiers and tanks, and Cole basically wants to just kill everybody so they can't give away their position. And Badrock's solution is, he shows off his superhero strongman muscles by throwing them all in the tank and launching the tank, 2 miles away maybe over some desert dunes. And Grifter's worried like, oh, well, when they land, they're going to let people know where we're at, as if they would survive that.
Yeah.
But then it splashes into some to I guess a lake that's over the dunes. I don't know where the lake in the desert comes in, but
well, I liked that you said you're going to ask for favorite parts. Well, you just hit mine in the issue, but because I'm one of the old fashioned people that thinks superheroes shouldn't go around killing folks. But I always find it interesting, to compare it to a Marvel character. I never find the Punisher very interesting unless he's played off a more traditional hero where he kind of puts their morals to the test. So Grifter, it's like, okay, he's making sense. They can't raise the alarm. And so Badrock, instead of being the wishy-washy, oh no, we can't do this, he proves how capable he is. That he literally did his homework. He says, yes, all those geography lessons finally pay off. That he knew where the lake was, so he comes up with a solution, and it kind of shows that he's a little more capable than you get from his, parachuting in, watch me do the loop-de-loop and all that stuff. It shows that he can kind of hold his own there with a soldier like Grifter.
Yeah, and at this point, he'd been a member of Youngblood for several years. Although in comic book time, maybe it's only been like a year because people don't really age properly. But yeah, he's experienced, so he kind of surprises Grifter with that maneuver.
Yeah, that was a good moment. I like that contrast of the styles there, and that they found a way to work it out. That acknowledges like, hey, okay, there could be repercussions if you don't kill him, and Badrock's like, okay, there's a better way.
Mm-hmm. Once they get to the compound, we don't see Grifter as much. It's pretty much they're both doing their own thing. So Grifter's taking on the soldiers, and Badrock's taking on the cyborgs that maybe Grifter's not as well equipped to handle. But pretty clearly, Grifter's killing people left and right in the assault.
And Grifter has an awesome moment in there too when he's falling in there and he uses the guns to break his fall, which I'm not an expert on guns or physics. I question that a little.
Sure.
But not only does he do that, but he shoots a hole in that bridge and gets the two guys to blast each other. So it's like it's a pretty cool action hero move in there that gives him something impressive to do while Badrock's breaking stuff and throwing tanks.
I guess you could argue that he weakened the floor so that it gives way with his impact, kind of lessening the impact of him falling. I guess you got to jump through some hoops to come to that conclusion, but
yeah. Well, I don't read comics for the science anyway.
Sure. So yeah, he pretty much, we do get, like you said, a really abrupt ending with Badrock finds his mom being held by the Covenant members and takes him out and inadvertently knocks her off this platform where she could very easily fall to her death, but Grifter's able to swing in at the last second and save her, and she realizes who he is. And like you said, it's really abrupt. Like, we get on the last page, he saves Badrock's mom. They have their reveal that Grifter is her ex-fiance or her ex-boyfriend, and Badrock's surprised at this revelation. And then next issue, Shadowhawk.
Yeah, she would recognize that hairline anywhere. Maybe it's the voice.
Let me see if I can. Also, the Covenant of the Sword is I was a little familiar with them outside of this because they had shown up in some other Liefeld books. I think Bloodstrike, which is sort of like the even more extreme version of Youngblood.
That's a pretty 90s name right there.
Oh, yeah. Actually, maybe a year and a half ago, I started working on a Bloodstrike piece for the UnspokenDecade.com that I've never finished. I got like 90% of it done, and then I put it to the side, and I just have never finished it. I'm hoping to get that done in the next couple weeks now that we're going through this isolation deal and finally getting it up. But anyway, the Covenant of the Sword is actually a organization that is mostly known in Savage Dragon. Eric Larson created the Covenant of the Sword. I'll just read from the Wikipedia. Yeah. The Covenant of the Sword is a fictional covert organization bent on global domination, appearing in the Image universe and created by Eric Larson. Although appearing in Larson's flagship title, Savage Dragon, the Covenant also appeared in a number of Extreme Studios comics by Rob Liefeld, most notably Bloodstrike and Badrock. So there's not a whole lot of history given to them as far as, like, in this particular issue. They're just generic terrorist bad guys. They kidnapped Badrock's mom to give the heroes something to do. But we do see a lot more of them in the Savage Dragon title. At one point, they kidnap Dragon's baby, who grows up to be the new dragon, who is in the title's main character now. But it was cool to see them pop up in another book, because I didn't really remember them being anywhere else outside of Savage Dragon until I read this again.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't realize that, but that's cool that it isn't just something they threw together, but it builds that world.
Well, I already kind of stepped on it, but if you wanna, did you have that as your favorite moment with the tank?
Yeah, and like I said, not only, I mean, it was cool by itself, but it also shows you a little more after they contrasted how different Grifter and Badrock were. It shows you, hey, Badrock's a competent dude too.
Well, I'll go with just a specific panel, which is on page 3, the first panel there with Grifter coming down with his parachute, guns blazing, kind of a typical Grifter move, like that. It's something you would have almost see in WildC.A.T.S in one of those early issues, except not by Jim Lee, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a cool book. I'm a huge fan of Badrock, so I'm always eager to jump back into anything Youngblood related or Badrock specifically. So, like I told Jesse on a few other episodes we've done, like Darkhawk and that Busick, Perez Avengers, some of the Ultraverse books, like the opportunity to talk about these characters that I loved so much when I was younger is kind of the whole point of this. So it was cool to get to do this book for sure.
Now, I am surprised since it was you and me that we didn't end up with a poll between Sleepwalker and Darkhawk.
We're going to get to Sleepwalker eventually. I'm kind of surprised I haven't shoehorned him into a poll yet. A lot of times it's kind of loosey-goosey as far as how we do those polls. Sometimes we'll pick a subject, and like each of us, between me and Jesse, will pick an issue to put in, and then sometimes he'll just say, hey, put up a poll this week, and I'll put up one next week, and we'll see what happens. But eventually we're also going to have to do some that like some loser brackets, like Thunderstrike #1, I think lost the first poll, so we got to throw back in there at some point and try. And I got to do a Thunderstrike episode eventually. So
the Thunderstrike is a series that I am trying to complete, and I love Thunderstrike, but at some point I had to acknowledge that I never read anything past the first issue. I didn't see them, and then I've picked up a lot of them through bargain bins. And so I'm kind of like waiting to complete the set, I guess, and then read through it. But I love like the knockoff heroes, and the D-list guys.
I think it went 24 issues.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. I know. I mean, the first issue is just like. I mean, it's an iconic '90s cover.
Oh yeah.
The glittery lightning in the background and him with his extreme jacket and earring and everything and ponytail.
Mm-hmm.
I love Thunderstrike, and I read the first probably 4 to 5 issues. I'd say I think that was around the time I got out of comics for a little while. I think early in that run, so I never had a complete set. I think at this point I've probably like you, I've tried to collect them through bargain bins and at Comic Cons and stuff over the years, and I'm probably about 80% there, but I think I'm still missing several issues.
I've gotten a lot of them, but a friend of mine had a guy he works with did some odd jobs for a lady, and she paid him with a box of comics, and he brought them to me to see if there were any I was interested in, helping figure out how much they were worth, and one of them in that was Thunderstrike 24, which was the last issue.
Oh.
And so I was looking online and in price guides, just trying to give the guy an idea. I'm not an expert on it, but just trying to give him an idea. And I was like, well, shoot, I'm going to buy this from him. And so one place I saw was selling for like 20 some bucks.
Wow.
I don't know if it's because it was a low print run or because Thunderstrike actually stayed dead or what it is. But I was like, man, I want to complete this, but that's more than I've spent on the entire series.
Yeah, I mean, I almost think it's got to be a print run issue, kind of like the last G.I. Joe and last Transformers, Star Wars, or later Star Wars issues from the 80s. A lot of those, the print run, a lot of times is why that stuff goes up. And I can't imagine it being any other reason in the case of Thunderstrike.
But I remember that poll because I voted for Thunderstrike. And if you put it up there again, I will vote for Thunderstrike again.
I think that was a pretty close one. I think he must have given me free reign to do the first poll because I think it was Prototype #1 versus Thunderstrike #1.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was good either way because I was excited to do a Ultraverse book in our first episode as well. So, but anyway, let's check out the Facebook comments. We've only got a couple. Let's see. We got Matt Hickman, one of our top fans for the Unspoken Decade. He says, Telos is great. Fun fact, that Badrock and Company issue is actually a 3-way crossover because of who the baddies are. So I'm assuming he's referring to the Covenant of the Sword being a Savage Dragon villain group. And then the only other comment was James Purcell. He's also a top fan. And he says, is Telos underappreciated? To which I actually responded, I rarely see or hear about it, so I'll say yes. And given the results of the poll, I think I was vindicated in my assumption that it was underappreciated. And I mean, I know a lot of people love that book, and I just feel like nobody ever talks about it. I never hear anything about it or see anything about it. So that's why when I made the poll, I referred to it as underappreciated.
Well, I will try to vote for it sometime as long as you don't put it up against Thunderstrike because there's no contest.
I'll keep it in mind. I'll keep that in mind for sure. But shout out to James Purcell also because as I realized not too long ago, he is actually, I believe he's part of the Savage Fincast podcast who do the Savage Dragon podcast, which is pretty cool. I'm not like I don't listen to every episode of that, but I do listen to it from time to time, and it's pretty cool to have I'm a huge Savage Dragon fan. I know you're weren't really an Image guy, so you probably haven't read a lot of Savage Dragon, but that was one of my favorite books, and to this day, like the first 75 issues or so of Savage Dragon, to me is one of my favorite runs of comics ever. It's just a really fun, action-packed comic, and so I'm glad that book's still running.
They've got the complete run on Hoopla, so I've got it too. Especially since Hoopla boosted their borrowing limit during the quarantine, I've got that on my list to check out because I just I've only read a couple, but I mean. Just the fact that Larson's kept it going this long, kind of doing his own thing, and
right.
Like I said, having his son take over, having time pass, it seems like something that I'd like.
Right. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and plug myself. I did the first thing I did for the Unspoken Decade website was a Savage Dragon look back, which you can find under JC Armstrong on UnspokenDecade.com while I'm doing plugs. You can follow me at BrodyMan34 on Twitter. Evan, you got a couple plugs you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I have written a web comic called Support Group. It's about a support group for people with lame superpowers. case your origin doesn't go the way they show it in the comics. And you can find that on Webtoons. Hopefully we'll get into our third issue and then have our brand new fourth issue starting at some point this year. I write about comics for a couple of publications, Graffiti, an entertainment publication in West Virginia, and the Parkersburg News and Sentinel. I do a column called Back Issues. You can find it at newsandsentinel.com, letting folks know about the comic book origins of their favorite TV and movie stars. And then you can follow me at Evan Bevins on Twitter if you would like to find out the obscure first names of random Star Wars characters.
I certainly appreciate it.
Sheev Palpatine, ladies and gentlemen. Sheev Palpatine.
I just call him Palpy. That's me.
To his face?
Lord, no. I don't want to fry. So let's get a couple thank yous out of the way before we head off. Thanks to Dean Compton of the Unspoken Decade for giving us the platform here to talk 90s comics, to Mark Radlick at the Radlick Broadcasting Network and W2M Network for hosting the podcast. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcatcher for all of that fine content. For Evan Bevins, I'm Chris Armstrong saying stay safe and stay home if you can. We'll catch you next time. Yabba dabba doom.